conversation. Hey, yo, let's chop it up, man. Hey, yo, let's have a conversation. Hey, yo, may I interject? It's about time for communal reconnect. Power of the we in some type of context. Working on the us so we can hit up what's next. It's that grown brother, grown sister type of flex. More like soul check, not just collecting checks. Fact, not feelings is what we got on deck. Take the high road, so this here is high tech. Getting to the real, everything that we hitting on. Pull up or sit down, tell me what you sipping on. Reclaiming kinghood, that is what we getting on. Real headlines is what we spitting on. So, hey now, yo, let's have a conversation. Maybe take a sec to talk on what we facing. Only way to change it.
All right. Last week, we started our Black Man Can't Lead series last week with examining that very notion of that there's this overwhelming feeling amongst our women that Black men can't lead. We looked at that issue from a standpoint of where we are today in terms of our relationships with one another. And what I mean by each other, I'm talking about Black men and Black women relationships. So too often, I hear a lot of our Black women talk about they just want a Black man to lead. And when asking them about being submissive, they often respond with they will be submissive when they find the right one who can lead. So with over 75% of our women not married or in any significant long-term relationship, if you take what our women are saying at face value, that they will submit when they find a man that can actually, the right man that can actually lead, our 75% of our women are saying that there are just not enough black men that are fit to lead because they're not being submissive. They're not coming under if you are a Christian or got a Christian background, your man or your husband is your covering. They're refusing to come under covering with us. So are they saying that if 75% of our women are single and actually 54% of our Black men are single, what are they saying? That our men are not fit? We kind of asked that question on our stream last week about Black men's fitness. And also we asked, do our Black women have a valid point about our fitness? So let's recap some of the questions that we put out there for the fellas to talk about. We asked the question, when there's an issue in the family that needs to be solved, which man in your family is brought that issue that for either him to resolve or him come up with the plan that will lead to the resolution? What man in your family is doing that? Are you that man? We asked that question last week. We also asked, so what exactly or who exactly are Black men leading when over 70% of Black homes are headed by women? So if we are fit to lead, who are we leading when all the homes there ain't no men in the home? So who exactly are we leading? We also asked the question, what economic industry are Black men leading? We came up with a resounding kind of none, during that time. And according to blackdemographics.com, only 33% of Black men are married. Of that 33%, how many of them are actually leading their homes as well? Here's the bigger question that was asked last week. With all of these leadership gaps that we talked about or asked about, the bigger question, some of the men in the discussion last week stated that Black men are definitely fit to lead. But some of those affirmative statements were followed up by like qualifiers, like, yeah, well, if she allows us to, or if the power structure just get out of our way. Here's a follow-up question to those qualifiers. in order to lead, why do we need permission to do so? That's my question. Now, that particular question we're going to actually answer. We're going to use a whole stream on just that one question a little bit down the line. But here's what I want to do right now. And to be honest, I don't know how long we're going to deal with this topic today, because this is going to be, I think this is going to be quite heavy. But first, where does this notion come from that Black men can't lead? Why is this a thing anyway? Where did this come from? Like with most social constructs with Black folk, nothing is simple and nothing is really clear cut. Any multi-layered question regarding Black folks requires a very complicated answer. The short answer to most or almost all questions about the state of Black people right now and the ideals that are lacking in Black people right now, the short answer to why all of those things are is programming. Programming is the short answer. That says a lot. Programming says a lot. And it says nothing at the same time. But before we jump ahead into our first topic, let me just say, while I was researching and putting the stream together, I thought I knew a lot about the subject. The subject title of the stream today is buck breaking. But there was one piece of this subject that I did not know took place. And I pride myself to be a pretty good historian on issues that related to us. I mean, either I didn't know or I blocked it out. And coming to that realization, I'm pretty disgusted by one of the methodologies that we're going to be talking about today. In our second stream today, which will deal with the title subject, we'll get into a practice that I feel every Black man should know about. But let's talk about programming. I think today you can't talk about Black people's programming without mentioning or discussing the Willie Lynch letter. The Willie Lynch letters were nothing but a system of programming. We're not going to go into the entire Willie Lynch letter tonight, but you can go look it up for yourself in the history of Willie Lynch. I'm actually going to talk about who he was in just a second. However, I do want to go over three concepts within the Willie Lynch letter related to programming. After that, I have a question for the men that have joined me tonight and the lady that's joined me tonight. And that question is, here's the question, and I'll ask it later because I'm about to bring up the Willie Lynch stuff. How much of historical programming have affected the concept or the notion that Black men can't lead? Now, the name of the stream today is called Black Men Can't Lead, Buck Breaking. While we get into this discussion about Willie Lynch, I want you guys to really understand the Willie Lynch letters and buck breaking, while they're related, those are two different concepts. One is a programming and one is how to program. So understand that. So if we, in the Willie Lynch discussion, if we get into that, and I stop you on the buck breaking, because after we do our 3D radio break, we come back, we're going to talk about buck breaking specifically, okay? But the question is, how much of historical programming have affected the notion that Black men can't lead? The notion or the concept of that, or that our women kind of feel that way to varying degrees. Okay. All right. Let me bring this up real quick. I got to make this bigger because I'm getting old. All right. Who is Willie Lynch? Okay. Who is Willie Lynch? William Willie Lynch was a British slave owner that resided in the West Indies. There's a lot of misconception that there are people who actually think that Willie Lynch was a West Indian. He's not. He's a British man who was a slave owner in the West Indies, which is like the Caribbean area. And he came to the United States to advise American slave owners how to keep their slaves restrained and in line. And according to an essay in Brotherhood Man, The Odyssey of a Black Man in America, an anthology lynching, or the term lynch law, is actually attributed to Willie Lynch's name, or are attributed to him. The hanging of black men. The William Lynch speech, or the Willie Lynch speech, or it's more commonly known as the Willie Lynch letter, is from. There's a lot of debate about its origins, but it attracted a lot of widespread attention when it was scattered on the internet in the 1990s. It was said to have been addressed to an audience on the banks of the James River in Virginia. So they're saying that the first time anybody heard about the concept of Willie Lynch, this was happening. It happened in Virginia. He was addressing a group of slave owners in Virginia in 1712 regarding the control of their slaves, because during that era, there was multiple rebellions going on within the slave industry, because that was actually still a little early on. So you had a lot of these Africans, that they were in a country that was very, very rebellious, obviously, and didn't take kindly to being captured. So due to quite a few slave revolts in the area, in the Virginia, South Carolina area prior to his visit, and he had a dubious reputation of being an authoritarian, being an authority and a strict slave owner, and believers in his concept really revered his concept. So I'm gonna talk about I told you 3 concepts I want to go over. The first one was breaking the spirit. Okay. One of the strategies that he implored was how to break the spirit of the man, of the black man. All right. Well, at the time, there's no such thing as a black man. We were just Africans. Breaking the spirit of the man, much like you would break the spirit of a horse. So he automatically dehumanized black men or African men and compared them to cattle, to basically horses, property. And everybody knows what happens when you have a wild horse. You have to break that horse to make him fit to ride. And ride, and then also you have to do is ride the woman as though she was a wild donkey until she is tamed and offers no resistance. What that basically means is, what this is nicely saying, and ride the woman until she's tamed, what they're basically saying is you rape her, grape her, whatever you want to call it, you rape her until she submits. The black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become a self-fulfilling, self-refueling, and self-generating for hundreds of years, meaning, and maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch in. You must also create an environment where you have the old black man versus the young black male, and you must also use dark-skinned slaves versus light-skinned slaves. Remember, during slavery, if you were a light-skinned slave, you actually worked in the house. You got treated a little better. You got bathed. You got to eat the scraps of food left over off of the meals that were protected. You actually had a higher status on the plantation if you were in the house, which created envy between the field hands and the people who worked in the house. You also must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. How do you see that play out today? How do you see that play out today when you got 75% of our women are the heads of the houses? How do you see that today? When a family divorces, you take the children from, you give the children from the men and give the women the power to actually determine if you can see your child or not. The male versus the male versus female keep us constantly divided. They must love, respect, and only trust us, meaning white people. You got to create a situation. You got to break their spirit. You got to put them at odds with one another. And then you got to give them the illusion that their salvation and their safety is only through them. Remember what happened in the 1960s when entitlement programs started running rampant in the Black community, and they started excommunicating Black men from the work environment. They started creating projects and telling these women, hey, you come in, get this Section 8, get this projects, get this food stamps, get this consistent $600 a month. We'll take care of you, but your man can't be there. Break his tie to the woman. Bullwhip the Black man in front of the woman until the child bullwhip the Black man in front of the woman and his child until he gives up his will to resist. Beat him into submission. Beating a man in front of his woman renders a severe sense of her not feeling safe. All right, everybody go ahead and cam up. Miss Philly, go ahead and unmute for me. Mr. Elemento, please unmute for me. Here's the question I have for you again. How much of the historical programming affected the notion that Black men can't lead? Mr. Frederick.
I would say it has affected a lot. It affected the notion a lot. The simple fact of saying, the simple fact of that being is kind of what we see currently, what we see presently. Like you mentioned earlier, single parent households plus the like the Section 8 and the Medicaid and the Medicaid, all those systems that is communicating with men from the household, and certain types of media, such as radio and television also have done that as well. I also say that we haven't really done ourselves any favors, not that we see or hear in media as well, and also living up to whatever types of stereotypes that are branded to us. So I'll say it has affected us a lot.
Okay, Mr. Patton.
Yeah, it's definitely has affected us. The programming out there, through history has pretty much removed us all from our position of power, So yeah.
The one thing that I understand about programming, the thing that we don't talk about programming, even though we know this stuff has happened, the thing about programming is the fact that we know it doesn't affect the fact that we still will do it. Miss Philly, how do you feel the historical programming has affected that? Miss Philly, you there? Did she just fall off? Go ahead, Hezekiah. Go ahead and answer the question for me until Miss Philly gets back.
I am from Lynchburg.
She dropped the ball.
I am from Lynchburg, Virginia, so I know a little bit of history about that. But
go ahead.
His way of doing things, even when the slaves was free, that didn't teach us how to live. Because what he taught them way back then it was meant to last for thousands of years, and it's still going on today. But they have switched it around to using it as a modern day slavery basis instead of, in the white sheets. And so now they got the judges, the lawyers, and how to disrupt the home with free stuff, free this. You can get TANF or you can get child support. He just showed them the blueprint, and they're still using that blueprint today. And until we open up and see that they're still using the same blueprint that he gave them back then, it's not going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Miss Philly?
Okay. It's basically like I mentioned before in another segment that we did. I was sharing with how the system, it was built on, instead of in the terms of wanting the government, the system, all of that to be the woman's man, because it goes back trying to rip and in a sense get rid of the man, the black man, the masculinity. They don't want that. They want men to be us, pretty much. They want the women to be dependent up on them for everything, because it's like, okay, well, if I give you this, I give you that, you don't need that. And so that's where why it's so much clash, because it is being programmed. It's being put out there in so many words and in so many ways. So that's my take on that.
One of the ladies on one of the streams one time, we got into this conversation about, what happens if you get a guy that is fit to lead, and she had a home, he has a home, and I told her, I said, well, if I'm the head of this house, if I'm the covering, you got to get rid of your home because you're coming over here. And she's like, no, I'm not doing that. Why not? And I'm like, why not? Well, I got to keep my home. For what? Well, just in case you fear. Absolute fear that we can't do what we need to do as men to keep you covered. And also one of the things I want to touch on, and I don't want to go too far off the beaten path. Everybody's getting all bent out of shape about, Deion Sanders and him leaving Jackson State and going to Colorado and stuff like that. And I tell people, and I was on the sports stream, and I told people, he was like, yo, Deion gave his word. Yes, he did. He promised some things. I said, but you have to understand what the role of a coach is for a football program. It's to win games. It's to win games and to recruit. Your football coach is a salesman. Sometimes, you gotta overpromise. You gotta promise stuff. Our politicians do that. Promise us all of this stuff that we may or may not be delivered in. But my point is with this, and I said on the sports stream that I was on, I said, why do we have this expectation for our black men to be the Messiah? And that he can't just be a man. Every other culture, the man can just be a man. And if he says, or he comes proven that he can handle covering his wife, raising a family, making good decisions in conjunction with the wife, and if the man says, you get rid of your house, that woman gets rid of her house. But our programming has our women to say, if I find me a woman who's a wife and she has her own home, and I tell her she got to get rid of her home, her knee-jerk reaction is going to be no. You might screw up. I'm 40 years old. What do you mean I might screw up? I ain't screwed up yet.
Definitely fear.
Fear. And what the Willie Lynch letter did, the programming. Now, none of us was around in 1712, but the effects and the how powerful it is when you ingrain something into a culture, when you program something into a culture. That fear of our women to not trust a proven black man, the fact that there's still a fear there to not trust that black man, you know what I mean, is proof positive that things get passed on through the generations, and it's continual programming. So how do we deal with that, Mr. Elemental? How do we deal with that?
I think the first way you deal with it is accepting that it is an issue.
Boom.
Not trying to see it as some conspiracy theory or some far off concept that does not exist in all our communities. I think once we acknowledge it, then we can truly address, how it's still affecting our communities. For me, that shows up like baby mamas and baby daddies, right? Because the core Black families don't necessarily mesh because of these things, because of the tactics that Willie Lynch used and brought into plantation life, made it to where these things are still happening today. That's why you see that there's a certain time frame that these things tend to happen. It's based on his tactics to keep the family separate. So I think it's just about acknowledging the fact that these things are still at play, right? They may look different, they may sound different, but the core values of these letters are still at play today. The only thing that we can do is address it for what it really is, not some conspiracy.
Miss Angela. Hey there, welcome. Miss Angela, can you hear me? You got go ahead and unmute Miss Queen of Collaboration.
Yes.
Okay, the question of the stream, Miss Angela, is how much of historical programming have affected the notion that Black men can't lead? We just went over the Willie Lynch letters.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect our women's view of Black males' leadership?
Well, I was just seeing the comment that Frederick had posted. We went from one thing to the next, and we never really addressed anything. Like we went from slavery to slavery. It just changed the look of slavery. It never ended. So now we have our men behind prison walls, and it's just a mess. And we have to understand, okay, when we gonna come out of this? When we gonna say enough is enough? For the ones, because you do have, I'm looking at men. These men right here on these screens, they look like they are leaders. They look like they could lead somebody. I would feel comfortable with them leading me. So we do have men that are capable of leading. So the question is, do you have women that want to come off the high horse and say, okay, let me humble myself and give this?
You're talking about we're talking about fellowship. The thing is, here's the thing. I understand that there are some. The sum is not the majority. The sum is the absolute minority of us, and that's not what we're judged on. I know there are women out here that will follow. I know there are Black men out here who are more than capable and more than fit to lead. But the fact of the matter is, that's not represented in the masses. And my thinking is, if it's not represented in the masses,
I mean, do we have to start somewhere? I mean, we have to start somewhere. We can't always think that everything is gonna come in the masses. Like, if it took us how long to get where we are?
And where is that?
Most of us thinking on the terms that we're thinking on, because a lot of us, well, with me, about 7 years ago, you couldn't have me sitting here having this conversation with y'all. So it took us time to get here. We didn't just wake up one day and be like, okay, I have arrived, and I see that we have an issue. We have a problem. Like, it took us some time to realize that we have a problem.
Yeah, Hezekiah.
But for me, and then being in this world, and then being in the dating game, and being single, and trying to find that right one, like, okay, I'm going to lead. Then you take that chance, and you're like, that person ain't even on the same planet you on, and you like, so why am I here and you are there? And their ways are more towards what the world is offering them now, the social medias, the Instagrams, the TikToks. And for us men, we're not really all about that. We all about building something, building yourself up financially. And the women, these, like you said, that modern day programming, they have programmed the women to not even notice us. The only thing they really notice us is what they can get out of us.
And that's not everybody, but yeah.
No, that's not everybody, but I'm speaking on, some of the females that I have met or came across. At the beginning, everything is, it's good, but then you're like, wow, okay. You got to be like it is what it is.
Yeah.
So where are you meeting these females at?
Hold on a second before you answer that, Miss Angela. Here's the thing, and all you got to do is kind of look at our representation. Our women, whose train is that? Our women gravitate to two extremes of black men. They either gravitate towards the lesser productive versions of us, or they want the extreme hyper successful, fiscally stable versions, and that leaves the rest of the men in the middle with what? Remember now, according to the we go, Angela, I go back and forth about the data. Only 20% of black men are making 80% of the babies in the black community. Only 20%. 54% of black men do not have, the majority of black men don't have any children. That means our women are selecting the men that they find valuable. And then talking about leadership and protection but the bulk of men are in the middle. Miss Philly?
I'm here. Going off of what Angela was stating about everything, not like we have to start somewhere, and everything's not going to happen overnight. I get what she's saying. Like, the thing about it is, like, let's pick a place to start, and then when it happens, it'll be like a domino effect. That's pretty much how everything in society has been. Like, it'll hit one person and then it'll take off like that. Just keep dominoing, going round and round, or whatever, however it's set up. So I think that's what I wanted to say on that. Like, just, we need to, like, I can't see the names, but like this gentleman over here said, like, we know it's an issue and there are issues. We acknowledge those, bring more light and awareness, pick a place where to start, and then act upon it. And once, just like with everything else that's happened in society, it'll eventually take off. I mean, slow progress is still progress. So it just needs to happen.
I got a question for the guys.
Sorry.
Yeah, I got a question for the guys, and I'm not even sure if I even know or got an answer for myself. But with this programming, especially when you look at the full Willie Lynch letter and the full spectrum of how to break your slave, and what it talked about was encapsulating their mind. That's what it talked about. So the fact that we can see in a lot of facets of our culture, even sometimes within ourselves, a lot of these tactics that they did as black men, as black men, and as men who's supposed to be the front line for our families. What do we do with this now? I mean, we have very rebellious women. We have women who feel they don't need us. We have women who select some of the worst of our group to reproduce with, but yet we're still responsible for we're held responsible for the outcomes of our so-called Black community. What do? How do we deal with this?
You know, for me, it's all about repetition and just learning, and you got to keep educating each other every day. It's not something you can just pick up one day and we're gonna have a discussion about. You have to keep going at it, because I can sit back and remember myself when I was young, and the things that, like you said, I was at the bottom of the totem pole where I didn't even care about no female. What? All right, I go get another one. But then I was at the top of the totem pole, and like you said, when you at that middle, now you at that chill stage. It's like, man, what did I do now? You got to think about that women too. It ain't just the men. Look how many times they've been hurt. Look how many times somebody has used what Willie Lynch has used, and the Black man has used that in their household as well. See, we don't think about, like, when I was going, it was okay for the Black man to tell his women what to do.
Hezekiah, you're talking about the 20% of men, which is not the majority of us, which goes back to when we're dealing with her image and her stuff, you know, talking about, and please ladies correct me if you feel like I'm wrong in my statement, but she's responsible for the volume of men that she run through her home and run through her life. She's responsible for that. I mean, you get it once, you get it twice, we can understand that, but you getting the same kind of dude over and over and over, that's not an accident, and that's not an accident. You a lady, you know, and you looking in your house, and each one of your offspring's got a different set of DNA tied to them.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, we're making choices, regardless if we want to believe it or not. And the one argument that I'm kind of tired of hearing a little bit is, I was young. Oh, I didn't know no better. Yes, you did. All you got to do is look around the community, look in your family. You just repeated what almost every other lady in your family did.
Well, I'm gonna say,
and the 54% of brothers that are out here that are single, childless, earn enough money to be in the middle class, we are held responsible for what the 20% do. But if we're held responsible for that 20%, or we're expected to come in and fix it, except me and mine, we're a package deal. But then you won't. But then you won't follow.
That's true.
Which is going to lead me to my next question in the next segment. We're going to do our 3DD radio break in a second here. Here's my next question. We're going to get into buck breaking. Is buck breaking responsible for Black women not actually coming into fellowship with Black men? And buck breaking isn't what I thought it was. So we'll have that discussion of what we think it is after the break. Okay, we'll be right back. All right.
I'm a king, cause I do what I want and what I need. I don't need you to nobody, I'm busy doing my thing. Mess with me and you could get forgotten, just let it sing. I don't play, I just win every day, I get it in. I'm a king, cause I do what I want and what I need. I don't need you to nobody, I'm busy doing my thing. Mess with me and you could get forgotten, just let it sing. I don't play, I just win every day, I get it in. I'm a king, and I will never kneel. Plotting for my fall, you getting hanged for 3